Imagine this. You reach for that trusty non-stick pan in your kitchen drawer, the one that lets eggs slide right off without a drop of oil. You fire up the stove and everything cooks perfect every time. But what if every scrape of that spatula is releasing invisible particles straight into your food, straight into your bloodstream, and straight into the bodies of your kids? Particles that never break down. Particles that build up for life. And the family behind them knew the risks decades ago. They tested, they measured, they watched people and animals get sick, yet they kept it all quiet while their empire grew richer than kings. Something is seriously wrong here, and almost nobody has connected all the dots until right now. This is the untold story of the DuPont family, America's chemical empire, and the dark legacy that is literally inside every single one of us. How did one French immigrant family turn a small powder mill into a force that shaped wars, cars, clothes, and the very air we breathe? And why does their name still whisper danger in courtrooms across the country? Stay with me, because the deeper we dig, the more the pieces fit together in a way that will leave you questioning everything you thought you knew about American success. It starts on a stormy Atlantic crossing in 1800. France is bleeding from the Revolution. Heads roll under the guillotine. Pierre Samuel DuPont de Nemours, a minor noble, economist, and friend to Thomas Jefferson, grabs his two sons and flees. Victor and young Eleuthère Irénée watch the old world disappear behind them. They land in New York with little more than connections and ambition. Pierre dreams of grand trade deals, but Eleuthère, fresh from training under the legendary chemist Lavoisier, spots something practical on a hunting trip. American gunpowder is trash, weak, smoky, overpriced. He knows he can do better. He pitches his father and secures French cash and American backing. In 1802, they buy land along the Brandywine River in Delaware. Water power roaring day and night, trees for charcoal, easy shipping to ports. They name it Eleutherian Mills, Freedom Mills. The irony will hit hard later. Construction begins. Stone buildings rise. Workers, many fellow French exiles, mix charcoal, sulfur, saltpeter in massive wheels. The first batches come out strong, clean, reliable. Sales take off. By the War of 1812, the mills supply the young nation's military. Cannons thunder because of DuPont powder. Profits pour in. The family builds homes right above the mills so they can watch every shift. Explosions happen, men die, but the business grows unstoppable. Eleuthere's sons Alfred, Henry, and Alexis take the reins. Henry runs it like a general, strict, loyal. During the Civil War, he refuses to sell 1 ounce to the Confederacy. DuPont powder fuels nearly half the Union's firepower at places like Gettysburg. Rivers of blood and smoke, all tied back to that Delaware riverbank. The family fortune explodes. They buy more land, build bigger houses, expand the mills into a small empire of their own. By the late 1800s, DuPont is the biggest black powder maker on Earth. But gunpowder is messy and dangerous. Competition and antitrust heat up. Then, in 1902, the old guard dies and 3 young cousins step forward. Alfred I. DuPont, T. Coleman DuPont, and Pierre S. DuPont. They pull off a bold buyout, paying the rest of the family a fraction of what it's worth. Control is theirs. Pierre, the quiet numbers man with a mind like a steel trap, sees the future is not in bangs, but in chemicals. He pours money into research labs. They start making paints, varnishes, dyes. Then, in 1915, Pierre rescues General Motors from collapse. He buys huge chunks of stock, joins the board, becomes chairman. DuPont chemicals coat GM cars. DuPont fabrics upholster them. The 2 giants become one machine. Family money flows both ways. The cousins modernize everything. Centralized management, massive scale. DuPont becomes a corporation that looks unstoppable. World War I arrives. DuPont supplies mountains of explosives. Profits hit records again. Congress investigates merchants of death. The family testifies. Nothing illegal, they say. But the public starts whispering. So DuPont launches a charm offensive. Better things for better living through chemistry. Billboards, radio shows, the slogan sticks for generations. Meanwhile, Pierre keeps expanding. They buy more companies, rubber, aviation. The family builds palatial estates across Delaware. Longwood Gardens with its fountains and orchids. Winterthur filled with American antiques. Nemours, a French chateau replica. Servants, horses, private trains. The DuPonts are American royalty now, but they keep the money tight. Many marriages happen between cousins, keeps the money inside the bloodline. People later wonder aloud if that closeness bred trouble down the road. The 20s and 30s bring miracles from the labs. Wallace Carothers joins in 1928, brilliant, tormented chemist. He invents neoprene, the first synthetic rubber. Then in 1935, he creates nylon, the polymer that changes the world. Women rip stockings off shells. During World War II, nylon goes to parachutes, flak jackets, tires. Soldiers drop from the sky on DuPont silk. The company ranks among the top war contractors. But the biggest secret project? The government taps DuPont for the Manhattan Project. They design, build, and run the Hanford plutonium plant in Washington state. No one outside a tiny circle knows. Workers handle material that will end the war in fire and ash over Japan. DuPont delivers. The atomic age is born with their fingerprints all over it. Peace comes. The labs keep humming. Mylar, Dacron, Orlon, Lycra later on. But one invention quietly changes everything. In 1938, a chemist named Roy Plunkett opens a tank expecting gas and finds white, slippery powder. Tetrafluoroethylene. They call it Teflon. Non-stick, heat-proof, chemical-proof. Miracle stuff. They start making it at the Washington Works plant in Parksburg, West Virginia, right on the Ohio River. Production ramps up in the 1950s. The chemical that makes it possible is called PFOA, or C8 inside the company, a surfactant that keeps the process smooth. No one outside the gates knows much about it. Locals are proud to work there. Good jobs, steady pay, the American dream. But inside the fences, something else is happening. Early tests in 1961 show rats given C8 develop enlarged livers. Company scientists write, handle with extreme care. Yet production continues. By the 1970s, workers notice strange things. Women on the Teflon line give birth to babies with defects, eye problems, missing nostrils. One child born with only one chamber in the heart. DuPont moves pregnant women off the line after internal alerts, then quietly moves them back. Documents later show they told employees there was no evidence of harm. Meanwhile, waste piles up. They dig pits. They dump sludge laced with C8 on nearby farmland. They release it into the air and the river. Year after year, more than 1 million pounds from that one plant alone. Enter Wilbur Tennant, a cattle farmer whose land borders the plant. In the early 1980s, his herd starts dying. Cows with black teeth, tumors the size of footballs, calves born deformed. He films it all, goes to DuPont. They say it's not them. Maybe poor farming. Wilbur knows better. The creek running through his property bubbles with foam sometimes. His dogs drink it and get sick. In 1998, he hires a lawyer named Rob Bilott. Rob is no tree hugger. He's a corporate defense attorney who has spent years protecting chemical companies, including sometimes DuPont. But something about Wilbur's story and those videos gets to him. He takes the case. What follows is a 20-year war. Rob files suit. DuPont fights like hell, but Rob wins a key order. Turn over everything. 110,000 internal documents come flooding out. The picture is devastating. DuPont knew C8 was in the drinking water of Parksburg since at least 1984. They tested employees' blood, levels off the charts. They tested local kids, same story. They ran animal studies showing tumors, organ damage, reproductive harm. They buried the results. They kept producing because C8 meant $1 billion a year in Teflon profits. One memo after another shows executives deciding not to warn anyone. Not the public, not the EPA at first. They even bought up contaminated farms to keep people quiet. The community learns the truth in waves. 70,000 people in the mid-Ohio Valley have C8 in their blood. Higher rates of kidney cancer, testicular cancer, thyroid disease, high cholesterol that pills can't fix, pregnant women with complications. The C8 Science Panel, paid for by DuPont as part of a settlement, still finds probable links to 6 major diseases. Probable, the word lawyers love. But the people living it know it's more than probable. They watched neighbors die. They buried children. Rob Bilott becomes DuPont's worst nightmare. He keeps digging, files more suits. The EPA finally acts in 2005, slaps DuPont with a $16.5 million fine, the largest environmental penalty in agency history at the time. Still a rounding error for the company. DuPont spins off the chemical division to Chemours in 2015, supposedly to isolate the mess. But and the DuPont family, they sit on an estimated $14 billion spread across more than 3,500 living relatives, still one of America's richest clans. Their mansions are open to the public as gardens and museums. Philanthropy shines bright. Hospitals, schools, historic preservation. They shaped Delaware politics for generations. Governors, senators, all with the name or the money. But behind the polished image, the questions never stop. Those cousin marriages to protect the fortune. How close did the bloodline get? John Eleuthère DuPont, heir to millions, builds Foxcatcher Farm, trains Olympic wrestlers. Then in 1996, shoots coach Dave Schultz point blank, convicted of murder. The family's darkest public moment. Was it isolated madness or something deeper? The empire keeps its secrets close. Think about it. The same family that gave us nylon stockings and bulletproof vests also gave us chemicals that persist longer than human civilization has existed. They profited from every major American war. They helped build the bomb. They laced the planet with molecules that bind to proteins and never let go. Regulators move slow. Science panels took years. Settlements came only after decades of suffering. And even today, Chemours, the spin-off, still faces accusations of ongoing discharges. The cycle continues. Profits first, clean up later, or never. What does that say about power in America? A family arrives poor, builds an empire on explosives, pivots to plastics, and leaves a toxic fingerprint that may never wash out. They live in splendor, while farmers lose herds, workers lose health, towns lose clean water. Documents prove they knew. Internal emails, lab reports, blood tests, all hidden until forced into daylight. Yet the name DuPont still sparkles on products, still sits in boardrooms, still funds good causes that make people forget the rest. The hook is simple. That non-stick pan, that waterproof jacket, that grease-proof wrapper, they all trace back to the same place, the same chemical family, the same decisions made in closed rooms where money outweighed lives. And now, those decisions are in your bloodstream too, forever. The DuPont story isn't over. The lawsuits pile higher. Scientists keep finding new harms. Babies born today carry C8 from their mothers. The empire adapted, rebranded, spun off liabilities, but the wealth and the chemicals remain. One lasts generations, the other lasts eternity. And the question that keeps echoing is this: how many other empires are doing the exact same thing right now, right under our noses, while we cook dinner on their miracle products? The dark legacy isn't history, it's today, it's tomorrow, it's in the water, the soil, the blood, and the family that started it all still smiles from their gardens and their balance sheets. America's chemical empire endures, but at what cost? The answer is still unfolding, one molecule at a time, and nobody is stopping it yet.
The DuPont family is one of the most fascinating examples of how aristocratic power adapted to the industrial age. They didn't just accumulate wealth. They built an empire on the things that modern civilization absolutely requires: chemicals, materials, weapons, and pharmaceuticals. The DuPont story begins in France, where the family was connected to aristocracy and operated a gunpowder mill. after the French Revolution, and note that many aristocratic families who fled revolutions seemed to end up wealthier and more powerful afterward. They came to America and established what would become one of the most powerful industrial dynasties in history. DuPont and Nemours supplied gunpowder for virtually every American war. The War of 1812, the Mexican-American War, the Civil War, both sides, incidentally. They profited from conflict regardless of who won. They later developed nylon, Teflon, Kevlar, and countless other materials that revolutionized modern life. But what makes DuPont significant, in the context of bloodline power, isn't just their wealth. It's their control over strategic resources and technologies. They hold patents on materials that are essential to modern life. They control chemical processes that governments depend on. They have the ability to enable or disable entire industries through their intellectual property. Let me give you a concrete example. DuPont developed and patented numerous pesticides and herbicides that modern agriculture depends on. They also developed seeds that only grow with those specific chemicals. They created a system where farmers worldwide must buy both the seeds and the chemicals from them, year after year. That's not just business, that's control over the food supply. Critics call this disaster capitalism, or problem reaction solution. Create the problem, monoculture agriculture that requires chemicals. Offer the solution, patented chemicals and seeds. Profit from the dependency you've created. Defenders say, this is just capitalism working as intended, creating products people need and profiting from them. I'll let you decide which interpretation feels more accurate. The DuPont family also maintained extraordinary secrecy and insularity. They practiced extensive intermarriage within the family, creating a clan structure more reminiscent of European aristocracy than American democratic capitalism. At one point, DuPont's owned most of Delaware, controlled its politics, and operated almost as a separate fiefdom within the United States. And they had documented connections to occult practices and secret societies. Several DuPont family members were involved in Freemasonry and other esoteric orders. John DuPont, one of the family heirs, exhibited increasingly bizarre behavior involving private wrestling teams and paranoid delusions before murdering an Olympic wrestler in 1996. The subsequent trial revealed a deeply dysfunctional family structure, hidden behind the public image of philanthropic industrialists. What DuPont represents is the militarization of science. They turned chemistry into weapons, materials into control systems, patents into power. They showed how a family could dominate civilization not through gold or land, but through control of the fundamental materials and processes that civilization requires. The Russell family is absolutely crucial to understanding how elite bloodlines reproduce their power across generations. They didn't just accumulate wealth, they created the institutional mechanism for recruiting and initiating new members into the elite. Yale University and the Skull and Bones Society. William Huntington Russell co-founded Skull and Bones in 1832, modeling it after German secret societies he encountered while studying abroad. Skull and Bones isn't just a fraternity. It's an initiation system, a recruitment mechanism, and a lifetime loyalty network. Every year, 15 Yale juniors are tapped for Skull and Bones. These aren't random selections. They're the sons of existing members, or young men who show exceptional promise for elite service. Once initiated, they become bonesmen for life, connected to every other member through bonds of secrecy and mutual advancement. The list of bonesmen is staggering. Multiple presidents, including William Howard Taft, George H.W. Bush, and George W. Bush. Supreme Court justices, CIA directors, including George H.W. Bush, media moguls like Henry Luce, who founded Time magazine, banking executives like Averell Harriman. Now, mainstream academics acknowledge that Skull and Bones exists and that it's an elite networking organization. Where they disagree with conspiracy researchers is on the significance. Academics say it's just networking like any alumni group. Successful people help other successful people. Nothing sinister. Conspiracy researchers say when you have a secret society where members take oaths of loyalty that supersede all other loyalties, including to country or family, and those members end up in the highest positions of power across government, intelligence, media, and banking, that's not networking, that's a shadow government. In 2004, both presidential candidates, John Kerry and George W. Bush, were Skull and Bones members. When asked about it by Tim Russert on Meet the Press, both men gave nearly identical responses. It's a secret. I can't talk about it. Think about that for a moment. Two men competing for the presidency of the United States, supposedly representing opposing parties and ideologies, both members of the same secret society, both refusing to discuss what happens in that society. Does that seem like democracy to you? Or does that seem like the illusion of choice? The esoteric elements of Skull and Bones are well documented by reporters who've interviewed former members willing to break their silence. The initiation rituals involve lying in a coffin, symbolic death and rebirth, and confessions of sexual history to create leverage and bonding. The meeting space, called the Tomb, is filled with occult symbolism, including the skull and crossbones that gives the society its name, a symbol associated with death, mortality, transformation, and also, interestingly, with the Knights Templar and pirate flags. But perhaps most revealing is the society's nickname for outsiders, barbarians. To the Bonesmen, everyone outside their initiated circle is a barbarian, an outsider, someone who doesn't understand how power really works. This reveals the fundamental worldview of these bloodlines. They see themselves as a separate class, initiated into mysteries that justify their rule over the uninitiated masses. DuPont and Russell together represent the technological and educational infrastructure of elite power. DuPont shows how controlling materials and scientific knowledge creates leverage over civilization. Russell shows how controlling education and initiation creates a self-perpetuating elite that remains cohesive across generations. This is sophisticated system building. These families didn't just react to the modern world, they created the systems that define the modern world, then positioned themselves at the control points of those systems. Now, we come to bloodlines that exist at the intersection of power and mythology, families whose public image is so carefully constructed that separating fact from fiction becomes nearly impossible. The Kennedy family is perhaps the most paradoxical on this list. Publicly, they're America's royal family, symbols of idealism, youth, and progressive politics. In conspiracy research, they're either victims of the power elite or secret members of it, depending on which researcher you consult. The Kennedy patriarch, Joseph Kennedy Sr., made his fortune through banking, bootlegging during Prohibition. This is documented, not theory, and Hollywood. He had connections to organized crime figures like Frank Costello and Sam Giancana. He had connections to British intelligence during World War II when he served as ambassador. And he had connections to the highest levels of American finance. Joseph was relentlessly ambitious, determined to create an American dynasty that would rival the European aristocracies. He achieved this through his sons, Joseph Jr., who died in World War II, John F. Kennedy, who became president, Robert Kennedy, who became Attorney General, and Ted Kennedy, who became a powerful senator for decades. But here's where the conspiracy research gets interesting. and where we have to be very careful to distinguish between what's documented and what's speculation. Documented fact: JFK was assassinated in 1963. The official story is that Lee Harvey Oswald acted alone. However, the House Select Committee on Assassinations concluded in 1979 that there was likely a conspiracy. The Kennedy family itself never believed the official story. Documented fact: RFK was assassinated in 1968. The official story is that Sirhan acted alone. However, ballistics evidence suggests shots came from multiple directions. Multiple witnesses reported seeing a girl in a polka dot dress fleeing the scene saying, "We shot him." This was never explained. Speculation: why were they assassinated? Some researchers claim JFK planned to dismantle the CIA after the Bay of Pigs disaster. He allegedly planned to pull out of Vietnam. He signed Executive Order 11,110, which some interpret as an attempt to issue silver-backed currency that would challenge the Federal Reserve's monopoly on money creation. He allegedly threatened to splinter the CIA into 1,000 pieces. Other researchers claim this is revisionist history, that JFK was as much a Cold Warrior as anyone, and that his assassination was about something else entirely. Perhaps his relationships with mafia figures who felt betrayed, or his affairs with women connected to foreign intelligence. I'm not going to tell you which version is correct, because honestly, we may never know. What I will say is this: the Kennedy assassinations, whatever their true cause, sent a message that resonated throughout the American power structure. After the Kennedys, no president seriously challenged the intelligence agencies or the financial system. The message seemed to be, there are limits to what even a president can do, and exceeding those limits has consequences. The Kennedy bloodline continues through descendants who remain involved in politics and activism, but never again reaching the heights of power that JFK achieved. Whether this is because they learned their lesson, or because the system learned to control them better, or simply because times changed, remains an open question. Aristotle. Onassis represents something unique on this list. A relative newcomer who achieved elite status through understanding how modern power actually works, through control of shipping, oil transportation, and strategic geographic positioning. Onassis was born in Turkey, fled to Argentina, and eventually controlled one of the world's largest shipping empires. But shipping wasn't just about moving goods. Shipping meant controlling where oil went, which nations got supplied, which economies prospered or starved. Onassis had leverage over the global economy's bloodstream. His connections were international. Greek shipping families, Saudi oil interests, American politicians, European aristocracy, and significantly, intelligence agencies from multiple countries. Onassis operated in the space where legitimate business and covert intelligence operations become indistinguishable. His marriage to Jacqueline Kennedy in 1968, 5 years after JFK's assassination, is central to the conspiracy mythology. Official story: a widow found love again with a wealthy man who could provide security and privacy. Alternative interpretation: a strategic alliance that reintegrated the Kennedy family into the international elite structure after JFK's attempt to break away. Was Jackie being protected, controlled, or rewarded? We don't know. What we do know is that after marrying Onassis, the Kennedy family's public criticisms of the intelligence establishment became considerably more muted. What Kennedy and Onassis together represent is the public face of elite power. They're the families that everyone knows, that appear in magazines and news broadcasts, that the public has opinions about. But according to conspiracy researchers, this public visibility is itself strategic. While everyone watches Kennedy and Onassis, The real decisions are being made by families like Rothschild and Rockefeller, who operate with much less public scrutiny. Now we reach the bloodlines that represent the apex of financial power. Families whose influence over banking, resources, and currency gives them leverage over nations and civilizations.